I love you, but be for real. Rock bottom isn't always the moment you think it is. Sometimes it comes later. Sometimes it hits harder or different than what you even planned for. And the healing isn't linear. A little bit about our guest, Jackie Suzanne. Most people do not come back from burning their house down in an alcohol fueled daze. Jackie did. Most people don't come back after losing a child to murder. Jackie did. Most people don't keep their sobriety for 5 years after experiencing the worst loss imaginable, but Jackie mother effing did. Most people don't use their pain to write and share stories of healing on the anniversary of their own child's death, but Jackie is doing it. You don't get to choose when life breaks you or what it throws at you, but you do get to choose who you become after. And sometimes your greatest gift to the world starts with the darkest night of your life and ends with becoming the light for others. So I want to give a very good, big, loving welcome to Jackie. Pew, pew, pew.
Wow. Wow. That's an impressive intro. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful and honored to be here with you and your audience today.
Thank you. Yes, I'm very honored to interview you, and I was like hoping that my intro would give you at least a little bit of justice, but I'm sure as we go along people will start to understand the power of your story and your journey. So, I wanted to start off with the fire. 5 years ago you almost died. Walk me through the day and like the events leading up to your almost untimely demise.
Well, 5 years ago during that episode, I believe that I did die. And I was resuscitated. So let me just tell you a little bit about my background. Oh my gosh, I was addicted to meth for a time. I was a single mother of 4 kids. I was a teen parent. I came from poverty. I came from a lot of domestic violence, sexual abuse in both sides of my family. And I really just like I didn't get a fair shake starting out. And I just kind of fell right into those same cycles. And unfortunately, also, that means I dragged my kids into those same cycles to a point. So I had been really struggling getting sober from alcohol. You think like when you quit using drugs, like you did a really great job and you must, be on the right path. But boy, alcohol is just as intense, if not, I had a harder time with the alcohol, I think, than I did quitting methamphetamines. So let me just like kind of tell you a little bit about like how my alcoholism was. I was the life of the party. Like I was the funnest lady around. It was always a good time. And I say that alcohol is a good time until it isn't. And I reached until it isn't. Point several years before I was actually able to quit drinking. So I kept trying, and I even moved from Oregon to Texas, thinking that if I made that geographical move, that I would be able to quit drinking alcohol. And it really didn't happen for me. I actually became like really physically dependent on the alcohol. It was no longer just for partying and for a good time. I like lost sense of timing. I didn't know if it was day or night sometimes. I was just sitting in this recliner and I'd buy a big box of beer and I'd pass out in it. I couldn't control my bodily functions half the time. And so when I would wake up, I couldn't handle like being without the alcohol. I would have the shakes. I would have like DDTs, hallucinations. So no matter what time it was, I would grab a new beer and start to drink, even if it was like in the middle of the night or if it was first thing in the morning. It was just like, it was such a sad existence. And I was such a very like big personality and, kind of fun and loud. And I mean, it took all of that from me. And it just was really difficult on my kids when it reached that level. Like they didn't want anything to do with me. It was tough. So I went to rehab and I got, I really did get sober and I was so excited on my new lease on life. And as soon as I got out of rehab, I instantly, I mean, within a freaking week's time, got into a relationship with someone else that was in AA program with me. And who describe him as like he literally had more demons than I had. And so then I entered into this really jaded, unhealthy, toxic relationship that was not safe. I wasn't safe in it, and I also wasn't safe, as his partner either. And it just started to get out of control. And then I had an episode. I bought a house, I bought a place in Texas, piece of property, and I had been in it only 2 days when we started having this like massive argument. I knew something was wrong with him. Like I could feel it. Like I knew he was like using drugs or cheating, or being unsafe. And um I I just did the only thing I knew how to do. I just coped by going out and drinking. And because I'd been sober for over a year and drank the same amount I would have drank before, it like I was in a blackout, like very quickly in a blackout. And I was angry and frustrated. And I know we were physically altercate. We have physical altercations. I couldn't tell you quite exactly what happened, but I do know that at some point, like I took a bunch of his paperwork and I took it into the bathtub of the brand new place. It wasn't new, but the bath of a place that I had purchased, and set a little fire. And the bathtub was old, so the chemical like burned and blasted. The bathtub like exploded and blasted on me and caught me on fire, caught the bathroom, the hallway. And I couldn't get out. Like it was instantly full of smoke. And I can specifically remember putting my hands on the hallway it was a mobile home, and I was trying to like find my way out, and it was burning me. It was on fire. And I was just thinking, how come I can't get out? Like it's not a very big hallway. And then I just remember saying I couldn't get out, and I was starting to like completely go under. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is how I die. Like this is what my kids are going to remember. This is like, I just couldn't believe it, but there was nothing I could do about it. So, I actually got lucky. The fire department came, and somehow they were able to see me through the flames. And so they busted in and they were able to get me out, but I was considered deceased and they had to resuscitate me. And then I was airlifted to the Galveston, Texas burn unit, where I was in a coma for 10 days and in the burn unit for, I think, 6 weeks. And they did lots of skin graft surgeries on me. I had like 33% of my body was burned to the third degree, and I had 3 skin graft surgeries done during that time process.
Wow. So
Yeah.
in that process, that's when you became sober through. And you said this was like a week after you came out of rehab?
No. I met the gentleman who I
Oh,
was
a
in this
week after.
toxic
And
relation
then,
about. This was about a year and a half after I came out of
okay.
rehab. Yeah. So it was September 7th, 2020. And I'd also gone through COVID, and that was like really, COVID was difficult on people who were trying to maintain sobriety in any form. So, I faced the COVID thing, and then, this toxic relationship, and finally broke and lost my sobriety about a year and a half after my rehab.
And something else I want to backtrack to that you said, like how alcohol is actually harder for you to stop than meth. I think because of marketing and the people who make money, they try to make it seem like alcohol is only addictive if you have a specific problem. Like, but it's like, no, alcohol is scientifically just as addictive as a lot of drugs, if not even more. So it's interesting that you bring up, like, you thought that if I could kick meth, I could kick drugs, I could kick alcohol, because that's the story that we're all told. But in reality, it's like alcohol is a drug just like any other drugs. It's just legal.
Yeah, so I describe it sometimes when you are like, if you are trying to get off of a hard drug like methamphetamines, if you are 2 or 3 days clean and you're taking your grocery cart through the grocery store, and you're not going to find a big bag of methamphetamines next to the toilet paper or next to the Diet Coke. They don't sell them in the store. So I feel like that's a piece that makes it easier, or to stay away from that, because you're not going to be faced with it every single where you go. Now, when you're an alcoholic and you're trying to not drink, the first ask it for your audience that doesn't drink, start to pay attention. Walk into a gas station and look, as you first walk in, all the double doors, there's this great big bin of ice and beer and bright signs, and everywhere you go, in restaurants and with family members, drinking wine. Any alcoholic beverage is promoted, accepted. It's wrapped up in a pretty package. It's like, if you tell people you don't drink, you will get looked at oddly more by saying you don't drink than if you say, yeah, sure, give me a couple shots. Everybody's like, oh yeah, we understand that.
Mhm.
So yeah, I felt like it had something to do with exactly what you're saying, the advertising, the marketing, and you face alcohol everywhere you go. Everywhere you go. You don't face methamphetamines or a hard drug everywhere you go.
Right. And I always think about that. I'm like, if the easiest drug to get addicted to is alcohol because it's so readily available. Um so yeah, I always think about that. What did you when you were did you have any visions or like remember the moment you died? Because some people talk about like when they die, they saw some sort of light and then they were alive. Like, did that anything like that happen for you?
I didn't really get to come back with that cool, it's an NDE, near death experience, but I certainly came back with a passion and a drive to find out what would have happened if I didn't make it back. I was obsessed with near death experiences after that. Like, I read a bunch of books on near death experiences, life between lives, like, so, people who do past life hypnosis and things like that. Like, so Brian Weiss has a book out called Many Lives, Many Masters, which I dived into. Michael Newton wrote Journey of the Souls and a couple other books about what happens after we die. And then for a couple years after that, I must have watched, several hundred near death experience interviews. I don't know. I was obsessed with it. I sort of like credit it towards just wanting to know what would have happened to me if I didn't make it. But I soon found out, I think that there was definitely another reason why I was so obsessed with near death experiences.
Mhm. And what do you think that reason was?
Well, we'll probably get into that later when we
Okay.
discuss some of the, loss that I suffered.
Okay. Um, Fair enough. So, and at the time when you went through recovering like from a physical perspective from the burns and then just maintaining rebuilding and maintaining your sobriety, did you think that that fire was your rock bottom? Were you like, yeah, this is the worst it's gonna get, can't get any worse?
Yeah, I felt like there was rock bottoms before that, like drinking in my chair. I had suicidal thoughts, in the past when I was drinking so heavy, and when I went into rehab, I thought that was my rock bottom. But I soon realized that really it was my rock bottom, because I died, and I knew that if I drank again, that it would be death for me. That's how severe of an alcoholic I was. So, I do consider that a rock bottom.
Okay. And then 2.5 years later, I believe, is when you lost your son. So tell me about, and I know you speak about it a little bit in your book, but like the moment that you received the call.
Yeah, so it was December 16th of 2022. Um, Yeah, my son had been having some real issues with his ex-wife and custody over my grandson, and just like some really nasty allegations that she was putting out there for him. He was having a tough time, and I just felt this pull. I left Texas. I sold my place and to come back to Oregon to help him out. I wanted to make sure he was just getting railroaded. I wanted to make sure he had finances to help with attorney. I wanted to make sure that he felt supported, to walk into the courtroom and fight for his son, for my grandson. And that was an inexplainable pull. For whatever reason, to just dump your whole life and your whole property and everything to come back to a state that you actually left, because of expenses and having a harder time with the cost of living here and things like that. So I made that decision. It was a little bit impromptu of a decision. Some people thought maybe I didn't think it out really well, but I was really pushed and pulled to come. So I did that. And I had moved about 2.5 hours away from him so that I would be close enough, to go to court with him and to, get visits with my grandson without being, on top of him. And so I was at home, and his fiance at the time, she had called me, and it was December 16th. Everybody's, doing the Christmas thing. So we were in it was a high vibrational, mood, a call. She was like talking about our Christmas plans. I was going to come to their house. We were going to have my grandson back because my son had finally gotten through all the custody crap and was able to like reinstate all of his visits and prove all of his information and faults. And he decided at that point to file for full custody, because he was like, she's not quite right, whatever, like to be saying these things and to, be causing such false allegations. He's like, I don't feel like my son is safe with her. So he filed for full custody at that point. And it was kind of starting to go his way. Like the agencies were really seeing that she had been making things up, that maybe the child was being told things, that he was definitely being alienated from his father and his whole father's side of the family. My little grandson was 7. He didn't know why. He didn't know why we were bad people. He just knew that he was being told we were bad. So Christmas time's coming, she's calling. We're talking about where I'm going to stay at, what our time together is going to look like, if I could bring my dog, our Christmas presents we're getting for each other. What do you want? Well, what do you want? And it was just it was Friday. It was just a high vibration. And what's interesting is I got swept up into that, and I had forgotten that it was my son's weekend to pick up my grandson. And he had been asking the mother if he could pick him up at the police station. He wanted to exchange there where he felt it was safer, where she couldn't say bad things about him, and she wouldn't do it. So he installed a dash cam on his car because he was worried that she was saying false allegations, and he was a little bit scared of her, that he'd been told that she bought a gun. And so he put the dash cam on his car so that when he went to pick up my grandson, he could point it exactly at the doorway. Nothing could get said bad about him. He could protect himself, protect everyone involved, but he wasn't going by himself. And he had actually told me, he's like, when he found out she bought the gun, he's like, I don't go by myself to pick Grayson up because I am afraid that she's really going to shoot me. And I didn't even dawn on me when his fiance and I were talking, that it was the day to go pick up my grandson and that she was in Christmas shopping. So that means she wasn't with him. And about 15 minutes after we got off that call, she called me right back and she's like, have you heard from your son? And I was like, well, I just assumed you guys were probably together. And she's like, no, he's picking up Grayson today. And she had heard a rumor that Devin's ex-wife had gotten arrested for an altercation. And she's like, what happened to Devin? Did he go to jail? Like, what's going on? And, just ask if Devin went to jail. Your audience would have to understand that this is such a straight-laced, clear-cut kid. He never in his life ever gotten into any trouble. Like, he doesn't drink. He doesn't use any kind of drugs. He's super, he's a square. He's a really straight-laced boy. And so, I mean, to even have to contemplate that thought or ask that thought. So I did start to think, well, I mean, she really had been making his life miserable. I mean, and kept his son from him for almost a year. It cost him thousands and thousands of dollars. He had to postpone his wedding because he needed the money for custody instead. So I thought, what if he snapped? Like, what if, and I didn't think anything like tragic. I just thought, I could see him like slamming the car door while she was in his way or something, trying to get away from him, or, just something like that. But that, because he's he's a tall kid, he's 6'4", and she's a really tiny little woman. So I was like, anything like that could be misconstrued. So I did start to call the police department and ask. And then it wasn't, no one would give me any answers. And it wasn't very long after that that his fiance called. I mean, she was hysterical. She was screaming. She was saying that Paige killed him, that he was dead. And that's
Goodness.
where my nightmare started.
So, do you know why the police didn't say anything when you called in the first place?
No, I don't know why they didn't say anything. I don't know why they wouldn't give me any confirmation. If she was in jail, they wouldn't give me any confirmation if Devin was okay or deceased. I called the hospital to find out if there was a gunshot victim there. There was not. I was like super distressed. And I lived, like I said, at that point, it was 3.5 hours from where he was picking up my grandson, where this would have taken place. And it's snowing and icy and it's dark, and it's a long drive. And I just couldn't get a straight answer from anyone. So I finally had told his fiance, who was screaming, that he's dead. That, first of all, I was like, I feel so bad, but I told her, shut up. Don't say that. Like, shut up. Like
Yeah.
that, that's not true. And like, I don't know why somebody's causing so much drama. Don't say that. So then I told her, I was like, well, you're an hour away from where her house is. Why don't you just drive over there? If something happened, somebody got arrested, the police will be there. Find out, because
Mhm.
the cops would not answer any of us. I mean, it's a small town, and it was just like, that part was a real nightmare. So I just got in my truck and started driving because I didn't know what else to do.
Mhm.
And I was like driving, and I was alone. I mean, about 45 minutes into it. And um I got a call from my nephew, who had also went over there to check, and he said it's true. And he wasn't at the hospital because she just shot and killed him right there at the place. He didn't make it to a hospital.
And how did they catch her? Like, was it the dash
Well,
cams or like
she didn't even there's nothing she could do. So my 7-year-old grandson's in the house. Her elderly grandmother's in the house, and her elderly grandmother's calling 911, and she's still shooting him. They can still hear 3 more shots being fired on the 911 call. So there wasn't anything like she could do about that. But I
okay.
will tell you that dash cam made all the difference in the world, because I don't want to give away my whole book, but there was rumors circulating saying that he had been aggressive towards her, tried to kick in the door, and the dash cam caught it. Like, he knocked on the door, there was no word spoken, and she opened the door and opened fired on him. Like, there was nothing that he did. There was nothing aggressive. There were absolutely nothing. There were no threats on the phone. I mean, it was insane that she did that. Insane.
And because you were in the middle of your drive, did you have to like pull over? Did you just drive faster? Like, what was that moment like for you when it was
No, I
confirmed?
have to tell you that it was the oddest thing in the entire world. It was like time completely slowed down, and I got really calm, and I held the wheel really tight, and I just kept repeating to myself, like, drive. I don't think I slowed down, but I just started driving way more carefully, because I didn't want to go off the road, or I didn't want to have a wreck. I needed to get to the police station. I needed to get to my grandson. I needed to understand what was happening. So it just kind of felt like time slowed, and there was like this insane calmness that swept over me. And I just gripped the steering wheel even tighter, and I just breathed, and I would just repeat in my mind for like 3 hours of that drive, just like, Jackie, just keep it this way and that way. Keep it that, keep your hands tight, keep the wheels between the lines, like, keep your eyes focused. I just kept telling myself that kind of stuff over and over again
Until you got there.
until I got there.
And I mean, it's honestly just the worst call that you could ever get. How did you This would be the moment where a lot of people go back to drinking. How did you maintain your sobriety after one of the worst imaginable things that could happen?
Well, interestingly enough, My sobriety was one of the, and I do talk about that in the book, one of the first thoughts that I had when it was confirmed that he was gone. Number one was my other kids. Like I was so sad, and I didn't know what was going to happen when all my other kids found out about this. And the second thing that I thought was, how in the fuck am I going to stay sober now? That was like a big, huge part of my thought process. Um, and I instantly called a therapist, and also she was a 12-step program, so I instantly called her on the drive after I got almost to where I was going, to just be like, I don't want to drink. I just kept saying over and over again, I don't want to drink. I don't want to drink. I don't want to drink. And so I would say, like, there was a day and a half of just pure hell, pure shock, pure all the things you have to go through. But then I just instantly went to an AA program, even like having to sit there, like finding out that my son had just been shot and killed. But I still sat in those AA programs because I just didn't want to drink. I was so afraid of drinking. I was so afraid of letting down my other kids. I was so afraid of like letting down my son who'd been killed, my grandson who was still alive. That was just like the most important thing that was kind of pushing me, was to not drink.
And so you kind of, one, utilize your community support through AA, but then two, you had your why very strong. Like, my why is my other kids, my why is my grandson. And that's what helped you stay sober.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was so like, it was almost instant. I mean, the thought process I had, and the fact that Devin was gone off the face of this earth, and that I could never make up being an alcoholic mom to him. Like, it was instant. Like, I can never drink again. And I have to say, like, I've never had it this whole time. We're coming up on 3 years, and not one time have I ever thought to myself, wow, if I have a drink right now, I'll be better off. Like, there's no cravings, there's nothing. Like, it's gone. I just don't want to ever put my family or myself or my son or anybody in my life through that ever again.
And in like your sobriety, and then also after Devin's death, how has your relationship with your other kids changed?
Well, actually, it's a gift that Devin has left me, because his sister and I were estranged for over 5 years, and she was estranged from all of us, from all of her brothers, from all of my family. And when, he died, the call had to be made to her, and she came, and she's been with us ever since. My bond and my relationship with my 3 surviving kids is much more stronger now than it was before. And my desire to stay sober, my desire to be like the matriarch of my family, to hold them, to help us all be safe and loving to each other, has increased a lot.
How do you manage, cuz I heard you say like you can't make up the fact that like your son had an alcoholic mother. Like, how do you manage and balance like the fact of like you are not the same person that you were when you were drinking and doing drugs, and like not bring that guilt into the relationship that you have with your surviving kids now?
Well, I think it's easier not to bring that guilt into my relationship with my surviving kids now, because we all live like really close to each other. And my daughter was here all summer, so like they have a day-to-day look on me. Like, they can see me day after day after day, and my sobriety and my behavior and my attitude and things. So I think it's easier not to bring that in with them, because I've made amends. I get to just be this sober, different mother than what they grew up with. My hard time with the guilt and the shame is with my son that's gone, because we were just like, I was sober for 2.5 years, and the fire affected him the most. He's kind of such a rigid, straight-laced kid, and he was really like, he was really into church and stuff too. And he didn't have no tolerance or patience for me as an alcoholic. If I messed up, he didn't want anything to do with me. His boundaries were super clear. Now, the younger two boys, they were way more flexible and forgiving for me, like the lifestyle I had and things like that. Devin was not. So, I really had a hard time thinking like he's never going to see how much better I'm doing. He doesn't get to see the sober part of me. I started a women's empowerment nonprofit, right after the fire. And he was so proud of me for that. And he was like, he would keep up with it. And I could tell like it was really up his alley and it was starting to build some trust between us again. And, like me coming here, back to Oregon, but, not living because he didn't want me to live next to him. He was a little sketched out that I moved back to Oregon because he'd had this broken trust in me. He'd had this chaotic, kind of life with me for several years. So, I was just like really proving that to him that I was a safe place, that I was going to stay sober. And then, he died. And so I think that guilt and shame, it really came into play with him more than it did with my other kids.
What's something about him, like his personality, his spirit, that you wish the world knew beyond the tragedy that happened to him?
Yeah, I think it would just be and I do write a lot about his personality in the book, but he was just so quirky. He was 6'4" and dark-headed, handsome, really reserved and polite, really respectful of other people, and people really respected him, but he was so shy, so super socially like awkward, and he could have been a ladies' man for sure, but he wasn't like that. And so like his marriage to his ex-wife, she was his first sexual partner. He wasn't promiscuous. He was like very like I said, he was a little bit socially awkward. So I don't think people realize like how difficult it was for him to actually move through the world as socially like anxiety that he had, because people just saw him as just this like really respectful, polite, young man who was, kind of well put together, especially compared to his mother. So, he was kind of well put together. So I think like I don't think anybody quite would have known like how difficult it was for him to move through this world.
If someone is listening right now and they're either experiencing addiction or they're stuck in some sort of grief and they feel like, I don't know how I could heal from this, or I could stop using this drug to cope, what do you want to say to them specifically?
Well, I do want to say to them that I have stayed sober for 3 years through the murder of my child, through court custody battles, and the loss of my grandson out of my life. I've stayed sober through some of the most unimaginable circumstances, and I know that other people can stay sober as well. I think that there's two things that helped me the most. Number one was energy work. I'm a Reiki master. I think energy work was a huge part of how I could cope without drinking. Like it was a matter of calming my nervous system down. It was a matter of learning, to quiet myself, to still myself for meditation, you know. So I say energy work is like a huge part of it. And then the other part of it is connection. You have to stay connected. You can't isolate yourself. You can't be alone all the time, because then you only have your own mind telling you what's right and telling you what's wrong. That connection, when we're drinking or using or grieving, we want to pull back from anybody else. We feel judged because we're judging ourselves. We feel like we're not worth anything because we've broken our promises to ourselves over and over again. And so we feel like nobody wants us around because our behavior is disruptive. We let people down. So it's so easy to pull back from your loved ones and your friends and your family and your support group. And I'm saying, please don't do that. Lean into your support, lean into your family. Whether your behavior is shitty or not, those are the people that are going to love you hold you, lift you up, and help you through. So don't pull away from them, because all that is an excuse to only listen to your own mind. And your own mind in alcoholism and addiction is going to tell you a lot of lies. Your own mind is going to trick you. Your own mind is going to make your circumstances seem like you have no other choice but to drink or to use drugs. So the more time you spend in your head without other human beings, without connection, without love, the more at risk you are.
It kind of goes into something that I always talk about on the podcast, is like the importance of community. Like community, even if you're not dealing with those specific life challenges, anything, like you need community to survive. It's not a nice to have. It's something that we all need and we all deserve. You spoke about the spiritual aspect and Reiki, and I know you mentioned you feel very connected to Devin, even though he's not physically in this realm. When did you first realize that Devin was still communicating with you even after death?
So I think this is where we can jump back to all those near death experiences
Okay.
that I read about, all the life after lifetimes, all of that I dove into, thinking that it was because I died and I wanted to know what would have happened to me. So the first couple of days after I lost Devin, everything was, I mean, actually for a year, everything was so dark and so horrible. There was not a moment of comfort. There was nothing about what happened to him, what happened to us as a family, what happened to my grandson, nothing that I could find comfort in, except for even within the first few days, I would think of him being dead and I would think of him being gone and I would think of like the finality of that. And then I would like start to replay like some of those interviews I watched and what those people said. And then I would see like paragraphs of the books that I would read, and certain sentences would kind of come into my mind's eye, like, how people say when they die, where they go, and what that's really like, and that death is an illusion, things that I just didn't know how to grasp and believe in. But that stuff, and it was the only comfort that I found for a while, was just leaning on that, what I had read or what I had heard in an interview. So I would say that I just knew at the beginning, but I didn't know how to tap into it. I didn't know how to let myself feel, excuse me, relieved by it. Um, but there was a time, and I documented a lot of signs in the book, some very powerful signs. And where even when I wasn't quite with it, I knew enough to like snap a picture and to document it, to write about it. So the first one I think that really impacted me, and I did put this in the book, it meant a lot to me. I did have, for a very short temporary time, I did have my little grandson with me while we were going through the whole court thing. It was a mess. Um, and I just remember like we were outside, we were playing frisbee back and forth. And one of the things that happened in order to spend that time with him and have him was I had to leave the home that I bought, 2.5 hours, 3.5 hours away from him, and go to the town my son was murdered in, so that I could keep him in his school and with his community and his friends. And I did that like completely willingly, but then I had to give up a home I owned and go rent a home. And so we found it's a hard place to find to rent, and it was a hard time of year to find a rental, but we ended up with this little old beat up mobile home kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And they had put like rubber tires on top of the roof of it to kind of help with lightning strikes, because it's out in a hayfield, it could definitely was kind of like out in the wide open. So we had this little mobile home. We were out there, we were throwing the frisbee, and I had some dogs. And I mean, I gotta tell you, like, for the briefest of moments, it felt normal. Like my grandson and I are playing, the dogs are barking, court is off the table for a while, like him getting taken from me has gone out of my mind for a while. My son being dead has gone out of my mind for a while. And it was like just a few minutes of just like normalcy and, just joy of throwing the frisbee back and forth to my grandson. He's got dimples. He was smiling. It wasn't like this tragedy hanging over our heads. And we threw a frisbee on the roof of the little mobile home. And I was like, dang it. So I got a ladder and I climbed up on the to look on the roof of the mobile home, and I'm looking and I can't see that frisbee anywhere. And so I moved the ladder and I'm not going to climb on the roof of this mobile home, but I moved it all around. I kept looking. And so I thought, oh no, like it probably got wedged in one of the tires, otherwise I would have saw it on the roof. And so I was climbing down the ladder, and I don't know why I did it or what made me do it, but I stopped in the middle of the ladder. I looked up in the sky and I was like, hey, Dev, if you're up there, why don't you get that frisbee down for us? And then I was like, well, that was a weird thing to do. I didn't really think that it was true or that it could happen. So the next morning I went to take my little grandson to school, and right in front of the car, like where you're going to walk to open the car door, is that freaking frisbee.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I could not, I just couldn't believe it. I was so, and now I would say that that's probably my first real like tap on the shoulder, like, hey, and then of course, you're grieving and you're not brought up to think that way about consciousness and death. And so, I mean, I talked myself out of it, but not before I took a picture of it, not before like it made enough of an impact on me to go, wow, and document it. So, that was about 2 months after Devin died. And I'm not saying that there wasn't other signs, because there probably absolutely was. I just didn't understand what to look for, and I just wasn't willing to entertain them.
Mm-hmm. And like it's all about like with spiritual work, it's about like how open you are in general, because you'll get more coming in if you're open to it in general.
Yeah. I
So
didn't know
that
that at the time.
yeah, exactly. But that was the moment that you were open. I'm a person who just gets like a lot of signs. It's so weird. Whenever I go to the thrift store, it's not every time I'm there, but I've gotten signs at the thrift store multiple times where it's like you can't deny it. Like I had a dream. My late grandfather was like saying this Bible verse. It was like John 1, but he like I didn't hear like John 1:16 or John 1 whatever. So I'm like telling my mom, I'm like, I had this dream and he told me to tell you this verse. A couple months later, me and my mom go to the thrift store, and I'm like going through these shirts like half ass, and then there's a shirt that says John 1:16, grace upon grace. But like right before we walked in the thrift store, my mom was saying that she's working on giving people more grace. Like it's something that she needs to work on. And I find this random t-shirt, and we're in Philly at this point. So it's like this is like not an area where it's like everybody's super into the Bible. You're always gonna find a Bible related shirt. Like, no,
Right.
that's just not the case here. And I'm like, the one t-shirt I find, it's like John 1:16 just before, and she was saying like the grace thing. So I don't know why I always get signs in the thrift stores and other ways. And I'm like, I say to my mom all the time, I'm like, I don't know why I just always get signs. She was like, I was like, why don't other people get signs? Like, why do I get these signs? And she's like, well, other people are getting the same signs, but it's like you're just so open to it. Like spiritually, you're open to it. So you're seeing them more, but it doesn't mean that other people aren't getting them. It's just they
Yeah.
may like not notice it, or like in the beginning stages, maybe you were more open, but then you were like, you said you talked yourself out of it a little bit. So like that, sorry, that was a tangent, but yeah, it just made me think of that, of like the moment where you start to become a little bit open, then like it, in my experience, I feel like it just like everything kind of opens up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wrote a lot about that. And I also wrote about why, um, I, I felt like I wasn't getting these signs. There came a point where Devin's signs to other people were undeniable, but I couldn't accept that he was giving me the signs. And I realized that it had a lot to do with guilt and shame and self-worth. And so here's my son like working his butt off, to give me all these crazy miraculous signs. And I am like so shut off because I don't feel worthy, because I don't feel like I was a good enough mom. Why is he going to spend time in the afterlife trying to show me love, trying to show me that he's okay. And so I like that was a big part of my understanding. Like, and once I could start to try to work through that, then the doors kind of really opened up for me too.
Have you, in this time, now that you've had the doors open and you're more receptive to the messages, have you learned to forgive yourself? And do you feel like Devin has forgiven you for your past?
It is an amazing part of healing having him be able to communicate in spirit because he now knows everything about me. He knows everything I've ever done wrong. He knows all my family history, and he's able to see all of that from such a more higher, like loving perspective, that he says now, like he sees it all and he still loves me. And that turned a switch, I think, and that turned a dial in me being able to accept myself more, being able to accept my mistakes, my past, and being able to like start to love myself and forgive myself more. I think that that's a lifelong journey. I can't sit here and say, oh yeah, I've completely forgiven myself. I've flipped some switch and I love myself so much. I think that that's action and I have to work on that every single day. And whether that's a negative thought that creeps in where I say something kind of mean to myself, critical of myself, or whether that's just like pushing myself to do something I don't want to do because it makes me sad or uncomfortable, and being able to then go, oh, okay, look, I love myself enough that I'm not going to, put my body through any more stress or my mind through any more mental agony. But I think that's a daily thing that you have to continuously do. I don't think that I could sit on your platform right now and say I've completely forgiven myself, but it's a goal and I work towards it every day. And it's a lot easier knowing that he knows everything I've ever done wrong and he still loves me.
I think, and it adds like another component, just you being a mom in general, because I know, like, even from having a dog, like, I don't have a kid, but also just seeing my mom's experience, it's like a mother's guilt sometimes is not even rational. It's like, oh my gosh, I had to go to work and my kid was upset, like, and like mothers, I feel like, will create guilt because of like that deep, like, maternal care that they have, even if it's not like, I think our parents do the best that they can with the tools that they have. And like when I become a parent, I will do the best that I can with the tools that I have. But there's going to be things that I feel like, oh, I could have did this better. And I don't know. I don't know. I just think there's something about a mother's guilt that
Yes. Yeah.
is like a lifelong, like you said, like a lifelong journey and a lifelong thing that you're like working through. Um, and then like, how did spirituality, how were you able to reconcile that piece of your healing with the other piece of your healing that was more Christian based, like AA 12 steps? Because they both played a crucial role and both helped you stay sober. So, how did you kind of reconcile the two, especially if there were people on one end that didn't respect, like, oh, you're going on the spiritual way, or vice versa?
I think that we'll find out because I have I have, writing this book and, openly speaking about like my signs from Devon or my experiences with a medium or mediumship of my own actually and my energy healing. I don't think a lot of the people in my life really knew about that. And so they'll be finding out. So you'll have to check in with me about that part. As far as like my own self, AA started to give me the freedom of spirituality. There is a part of AA where we, then we find the higher power of our own,
Mm,
of our own belief system of, what makes us feel safe and loved as a higher power. And it took it out of that real rigid religious context took God out of that for me, where I actually got to start a relationship with a loving God, with a creator, with Jesus, who is not quite that same, you're going to go to hell religious figure that I had pressed upon me. So that started to give me a little bit of freedom anyways, was by being able to go to AA. And then I felt like at the beginning with Devin and the signs and dealing with his death, I struggled a lot with the Christianity piece, with the teachings that I had really pressed upon me, with old programming, old, thinking that mediums, are from the devil and that I was going to go to hell. And, I battled with that. I think excessively. I think quite a bit more than other people in my position who didn't have like that strange religious piece had to battle it. So I was another big step trying to overcome receiving his signs, receiving his information, was happening to understand like this isn't what I thought it was. This isn't a devil. This isn't, some big, scary, mysterious thing. We are all going to die. I don't know. I don't know why it took me so long to realize like we're all going to die. Like there's something that comes after death. Why don't you like start to figure it out?
I guess from that perspective, what, how, in your previous way of thinking, how did you think the signs were like connected to the devil? Because in my head, I always think of the devil as something like negative or like a negative influence to do something that's not good, like lying. But how like did your former like Christianity upbringing or whatever make you think that like something like signs from Devin could be the devil?
Well, because mediumship in general can be like more of a like witchcraft or devilly or anything from more of a religious type background. And I only had the religion that I had, that I received, and I'm sure there are plenty of other, Christian religions or religions that don't feel that way, but I only had what I had programmed in
Mm-hmm.
me. So I don't want to say all religion or all
Oh, I don't
Christianity,
think, yeah, you were saying
but
that.
mine, mine that was pressed upon me, that's what I was playing out. So I'm not saying that the signs from Devin made me feel like the devil, but just thinking that I was communicating with him, or that,
Mm-hmm.
that other people were communicating with him. I was like, I really had that, piece that this isn't okay. Like that comes from the devil.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, I think like there is just that fear of like mediumship and like communication with anything external that a lot of Christianity can demonize. Like, so I'm a yoga instructor and I've had people tell me like they believe that that's like witchcraft and like contacting with the devil. And it's like, well, I had another yoga instructor say, like, well, if that's your intent, that's what you're going to do. If you're going on your yoga mat to connect with the devil, like, then that's what you will be doing because that was your intent. So yeah, I've definitely like heard certain things and like always struggled because I was definitely raised like with like a Christian upbringing, and I was always like so confused how people could say certain things like yoga were going against my beliefs. And I'm like, no, I still believe the things I believe. I just also want to meditate or whatever
Right.
the case
Right.
may be.
And
And I don't
I
think those things need to go against each other.
Right. And I would like to say too that that was my perception of what people were going to think. And I have actually found that
Mm,
that's not exactly true. I don't have a lot of people in my life that are doing that or saying that. I'm like always pleasantly surprised when somebody I never would have felt comfortable saying, my son was murdered and dead, but I still get to talk to him and he talks back. Or I had a medium tell me some things that he said and prove that he was really there with her, So I'm finding that it's actually way more acceptable than what my mind was letting me think it was. So I think that was kind of on me, like my own judgment. Also,
Mm,
I'm a certain age, where like it was a little less common for me.
yeah, no, that makes sense. I think because I do know a couple moms who've lost children, and I think all of them have part of their grief and healing has been through connecting with their child through any type of medium. And I don't think they would have done that before the loss of a child. Like that kind of opened it up for them.
Yeah, that's what I say too about it is that, I was programmed a certain way. I thought certain things, but when you lose a child, you're going to you're going to open up. You're going to find ways. You're going to go searching. You're going to search for your child until you find them. So it changes, definitely, what you believe for sure.
And that leads me to kind of I wanted to talk about like reinvention after loss. And you went from going from Jackie Rubio to Jackie Suzanne in your rebrand. What does the name Jackie Suzanne represent for you that Jackie Rubio could not represent anymore?
Oh my gosh. I have to say, Jackie Suzanne represents freedom. It's freeing to be Jackie Suzanne and not be Jackie Rubio. So Jackie Rubio is my married, my ex-husband's name, which I kept because two of my children were named that name, and I wanted us to, have some bit of a family. So I kept that name, but Jackie Rubio was also Jackie F and Rubio. She was the badass drinker. She was the shit kicker. She was like the crazy party girl. She was the dumbass that got DUIs. She was the crappy mother that went on binge drinking for a couple days and leaving teenage kids at home. Like that came with a stigma. Like that was like responsibility. That was also like the drug addict. That was also the woman that got pissed off at her fiance and burnt the house down, like with herself in it. Like that just represented like a different part of my life. And also, then even when it was Jackie Rubio, the sober lady, then it was Jackie Rubio in court for the murder of her son. Then it was Jackie Rubio in court getting her ass kicked and her grandson taken away from her. Then it was, then it was a victim, Jackie Rubio. So it, it just isn't who I am now, And so,
Mhm.
Jackie Suzanne to me just represents freedom. I mean, this weight lifted off of me, this alcoholic past, person that made so many mistakes and person that got dragged through the courtroom as a victim because her son got murdered. It just like, it's freedom to me.
And what part of you did you have to let die in order to come back in this more free version of yourself?
I think like in spirituality circles, you guys, we might call it our ego self. And in my mind, what I had to give up and what I had to let die was just that victim. Was that victim who was born into a shitty family, who had bad things happen to her, who, that victim whose son got murdered, and that victim who the courts, railroaded her. And that victim mentality, even though don't get me wrong, these are things that are definitely not my fault. It is not my fault my son was shot and killed. It is not my fault that my family was full of child molesters and things like that. So I'm not trying to say that, but there is a victim mentality that sticks with you, when you've had these experiences. And I don't think that I got to gain any freedom until I was able to let that go, let that die, let that victim story stop being, me. Stop being part of my story that I told over and over. And I will say, I'm still working on that. There are still
Mhm.
plenty of days where I wake up and I just like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened to me in this lifetime. And and I'll think about it for a little while. And then, it's a story you start to tell yourself. But the more I can get out of that story, the more I can raise myself out of that and realize like I chose to be in this life. I probably chose these challenges, that if nothing else, that I have a whole spirit team around me who loves the shit out of me, who, is doing everything they can to help carry me forward and carry me through. It takes away the sting of that victim type mentality. And I think that for me, I had to let that die quite a bit in order to step into this new phase of life.
Mhm. How do you let go of the victim mentality while also honoring what has happened to you in your life and acknowledging like this was not a fun time of like when these things happen, like acknowledging and accepting your pain without staying in victim mode? How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a balance I think we all probably need to continue to work towards. So I will say this, I'm a really big stickler in the spiritual world. I think there's a lot of spiritual bypassing that happens where we don't honor our humanness, where we don't honor our grief, we don't honor our dark thoughts, we don't honor that part of us that we don't want other people to see. Because, we're told in spirituality that if we are grieving or sad or whatever, we have a low vibration and our children can't connect to us. And I am here to say bullshit. Like I was in deep grief, I was in darkness, and my son came over and over and over again to let me know that he was still here and that he loves me. So I don't buy into that like a spiritual bypassing. I think that we need to honor ourselves as humans first. Our vessel, our body, our grief, our minds, our mental health, our, physical being is the number one most important thing because we came here to be physical beings, to experience what it's like to be physical. What good does it come to earth to live that lifetime if all we're going to do then is just like float around as spiritual beings? We could stay where we were. That's how I feel about it. So I think like allowing yourself, to feel what you feel is the key to everything. And so don't push it away. Don't back away from it. Don't be afraid of feeling a negative thought or feeling angry at the person who killed your child, but my son Devin does come in often and he's like, you can feel what you feel, but mom, don't stay stuck in it. That's his big message to me. And he'll kind of let me know if I've been, in that thought loop for maybe a little too long. I can feel him and he'll never, ever shame me for being angry or in grief or anything like that. But, he'll just be like, I want to lift you up now, mom. Like, you've felt it. You've dealt with it. Like, let's now, move on and help people. That's like, that's the way you break that balance. You're not going to be thinking about your own pity party. You're not going to be thinking about your own child's murder or your own devastated childhood if you are then, for me, giving energy healing or giving, just my love or just, my light to someone else who's going through that. Now you've, brought yourself out of your own pain and you're opening up to help someone else through theirs. So I think that's a big key for me too, is helping others.
So that kind of brings me to one of my last questions. And it's like, what are you working on now that you're excited to share with others, including like your book, but then other energy work? Like, what excites you now?
Well, I have to say, like, so I have this cool Facebook group I like that I started. It's Light After Darkness,
Okay.
and I like to do healings in there. Um, I think that we're gonna have a healing that will probably a free healing that will be done by the time this airs, but we'll always have another one. I'm a Reiki master and a quantum healer. So I can do groups and I really do enjoy, doing free healings for people who need it, especially through the holiday times. So I'm pretty active in that group. I do have a business partner, a spiritual coach that I work with, and we do ancestral healings. So There's something about my ancestry and something about all the darkness that was in it now that Devin has passed. And pretty, he's very involved in my Reiki sessions, for one, and he's pretty adamant and has like really come through and gave me, some very prominent types of ways to heal and heal ancestral lines for myself and for other people. So I have a very intense 5-day ancestral line healing that I do with my coach
Mhm.
together, that I think it lights me up. I'm really excited about it. People will leave like light and clear headed, and they feel fantastic because we have gone beyond just what's happening in their energy system and in their day-to-day life. Now we've gone all the way back through to help clear it from their whole lineage line. And I just have seen some pretty amazing miracles happen out of that particular healing. And also, that I love that because it was really instructed by my son, which I know sounds bizarre to some people listening, that my, child on the other side can instruct me on how to do healings, but he does, and I really appreciate that. So, and then of course we have the book Murder to Messages coming out. That is going to launch December 16th, which is 3 years from his day that he died. And that book it's not a real long book, it's kind of a short book. Mostly because I had to remember what I felt like when I first was in grief or first having a little bit of a spiritual awakening. My eyes wouldn't work. My mind wouldn't retain any information. So, I wanted to tell Devin and I's story, but I also wanted to make sure people had hope afterwards. So I'm really excited about that book. Complete strangers, were going to get to know Devin. They'll get to know his personality, and they'll get to hear, some of my tried and true things that worked for me to get me out of that grief, out of that darkness, and into, being a Reiki healer, being, a person that just feels more loving towards everyone.
I love that. And just like I spoke about it in your intro, like using your grief, using your life experience to help others. If you could walk into the burning house and talk to the you who started that fire mad at your fiance, what would you say?
My gosh, I think I would just have to tell that version of myself that I love you, that I accept you, that I understand what triggered you, and that it's going to be okay. Like, we're going to start to work on your nervous system, we're going to start to work on your mental health, like we're going to give you tools to cope with things that don't include drinking yourself to death. So I think I would want to give that version of myself love and reassurance. I don't think that I've actually done that yet, like wholeheartedly been able to go back to that place and look at that burning woman who was such a mistake and such a mess, who ruined her family, like at that moment, and tell her I love her.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, because I know like with parts work, it's like accepting all parts of you. The parts of you that may feel uncomfortable, the parts of you that you wish others couldn't see, you were talking about earlier, like all those parts are still you. And even if you've like moved on from them as like how you cope or how you live, just honoring that they were there at that time with the tools that you had. So it's really
Yeah.
beautiful. I will be including the link to your book and your Facebook group and how to contact you in the description for everyone to find. And then for this podcast, like, subscribe, follow Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen or watch at I Love You But Podcasts, on Instagram, TikTok. I Love You But Be For Real, BFFR, on YouTube and Spotify. So thank you everyone for joining, and thank you so much, Jackie, for sharing your experience with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It really means a lot to me to be here.
Beautiful. Bye, everyone.